Welcome to Tim Talks Private Equity and Venture, where Tim Cunningham sits down with leading GPs and private markets professionals to explore the dynamic world of private capital. Since 2002, Tim and his team at Touchstone Group have been at the forefront of raising capital for buyout, growth, and venture funds. With decades of hands-on experience working alongside private equity and venture LPs and GPs, Tim brings deep industry insight and expertise to every conversation. Join us for candid discussions with GPs who are shaping private capital today. Now here's Tim.
Welcome, everybody. We've got Erik Wiklendt, and Erik is a managing director at Speyside Equity. Speyside is a value-focused buyout fund, and they specialize in the transition of lower market companies, principally in the industrial area. And I think, Erik, you joined in 2012, I guess, into Speyside, and you've spearheaded deal sourcing really at this point, and really hands-on operational improvements, and really a diverse set of industrial areas: metals, performance materials, specialty chemicals, manufacturing, and so forth. So you guys have done a bunch of different kinds of deals, and you like complicated deals. So you were at a bunch of Midwestern manufacturers, I guess. Hilti, Eaton, Deere. Well, Hilti was a venture sort of thing, I guess, and then Anderson, and Wharton, and Notre Dame. So get ready, everyone, for a deep dive into value creation, really decisive strategies, and what's next for industrial investing. You grew up in Detroit, right?
That is correct, sir. I grew up in Plymouth, Michigan, which is like halfway between Ann Arbor and Detroit.
Okay. And I understand from your profile there that you went to Catholic Central. Is that right?
Detroit Catholic Central High School.
Detroit Catholic, yeah.
Go Shamrocks. Best high school in Detroit. Ed Turek and Aaron Babbitt's would, if they listen to this, would be mad if I don't say that. So
there you go.
Got to give a shout out to the Shamrocks.
I am assuming the nuns didn't wrap your knuckles too hard.
No, we had priests, and they were great guys. And the motto of that school's teach me goodness, knowledge, wisdom, and they were pretty good at that. You got to say, it was a definitely formative experience in my life, and I'm glad I went there because it really provided a great foundation for success.
My son is a middle school teacher at Sacred Heart Girls Catholic School in Greenwich, Connecticut, and actually he said he was really impressed by the philosophical implications of what he was doing and how the nuns viewed their mission. Very cool. So I'm a bit familiar with that, although not a devout Catholic. But the values you get, and my grandsons are going to a Jesuit school, Fairfield Prep in Connecticut, and so we're kind of fans of the same sort of cultural stuff. What specific sorts of things do you think you took from Detroit Catholic?
So at Detroit Catholic Central, they really focused on just being excellent, I guess I would say, or trying to be the best that you could be. I remember in the weight room there was a quotation written across the weight room, and I kind of have adopted that as like my life credo, I guess I would say. And the what it said was, God's gift to you is yourself. Your gift to God is what you make of yourself. And I think all people have potential in some fashion or form, and to live a good life, part of that's finding out, what do you like, what are you good at, and then, trying to be good at it, and give back to others as part of that, and live a fulfilled life. So that was probably one of the big things I took away was push towards academic and athletic excellence, and try to be good at what you do, try to be good at what you do, try to be good in what you do, in life. And that's a good path for a fulfilled life. And, it was a great place to go to school and, learn those lessons both in the classroom and then out of the classroom on the athletic fields or, math courts, track, whatever it happened to be. And it just was a good way to learn, how to, have a kind of a process for success, I guess I will say, like goal setting.
And there's a certain amount of integrity to the process. I mean, that's part of the part of the culture. And I mean, trust and integrity in the private equity business is, it's essential. And I think people outside the industry don't get that. But it has to be. If you break that trust, lenders, various kinds of stakeholders, you have to work hard to build it as opposed to trying to break it down. So you're operating now in that same Ann Arbor, Detroit corridor kind of place, right? Yeah. So I would think you bringing that culture to your practice. And how has that region shaped the sourcing, your operator bench, and the cultural stuff in your approach to turnarounds and transformations?
Yeah, so obviously the middle of the United States, the Rust Belt, if you will, is the epicenter of industrial companies and manufacturing. So you'll see a lot of private equity firms out on the coast, either out in Manhattan or Greenwich, if you're there today, or Platinum is out in the LA area. Interestingly enough, the guy who started that is from Detroit, though. But like being in the Detroit area, where we're headquartered in Ann Arbor, is really beneficial just because for a few reasons. Number one is that we're near the action. We're near the companies we want to invest in. Number one. Number two, the kinds of people that run those sorts of companies, they have Midwest values, which are sometimes a little bit different from the coast. I feel like Midwest and like Southern values are very similar in a lot of ways. So when you go to a management presentation and you tell them you're headquartered in Michigan, they feel a little more kind of bonded to you. And then the third reason is talent. It's interesting. There are a lot of, Detroit is, just Michigan in general, Northwest, Northern Ohio, well, really all of Ohio, Indiana, Western Pennsylvania, that's all pretty well known for manufacturing. But Detroit, you get a lot of kids, of executives that are running manufacturing companies. And they go to the school system in Michigan is excellent. Both public and private. And then those folks go to really good colleges and universities, a lot of times end up working on the coast, and then, get to their late 20s, early 30s and say, you know what, I really loved growing up in Michigan or Ohio or Indiana. I want to go back there and raise my family. And so as a result, you look at a lot of people we've hired over the last year, they're all folks that moved away from Michigan and now want to move back. And so, we have the ability to get some really talented people into our fund because they want to be back where they grew up. So it's three reasons.
I can totally identify with that. I ended up working when I got out of Thunderbird Graduate School and International School. Bucyrus Erie in South Milwaukee hired me, and spent 7 years. And you don't get more industrial than a Bucyrus Erie, right? Cat ultimately bought them, but we market leader in walking draglines, electric shovels, and actually my first task after being hired was I got an armful of prints, and I was sent up to Hibbing, Minnesota, to put together a taconite shovel with the iron workers and millwrights and folks up there, and they told me that the experienced erection engineer would be around about once a week, so have fun. And it's really where I learned to really respect the people with skilled trades. I mean, electricians who can come in and from the hum of an induction motor say, I don't know what the hell's the matter with this guy. It's really, and also that almost nothing happens unless somebody gets up at 2 a.m. in the morning and goes, fix that damn machine. So those are the things that you don't learn if you're on Wall Street, for example. It just doesn't sink in that same way. You could feel the forge pounding the steel in when you were in the executive offices at Bucyrus and South Milwaukee. It was really quite a feeling, sort of like a little earthquake, but it was boom, boom, boom. Kind of cool. Anyway, so I relate to that. So you went to Notre Dame, you went to Wharton. My goodness, you could have gone in pretty much anywhere you wanted from the standpoint of the background there. But what was it that captured your interest in manufacturing and operations and strategy? And did you think you'd ever end up in investing? It seems like, you're more of a practical, hands-on kind of a fella.
Yeah, no, it's a fair characterization. So it's I feel like it's it's kind of two sides of the coin, right? Which is I really, really love the hands-on nature of manufacturing, right? I love the fact that it's so tangible, right? You see things that are made every day. And that's one love that I have, right? Is just the hands-on. I love hands-on tangible things. Just absolutely love it. I also really love the intellectual challenge of, figuring out how to make businesses better. So kind of private equity applied to manufacturing makes a lot of sense for me as a love of a career. I jokingly say that I would do my job for free. And I would, because it's I love finding businesses to buy, and then the kinds of businesses we buy need to be improved. And I love figuring out how to do that. And I love doing it. And then I love, seeing how that creates a great return on investment. So I'm a little bit like, I drive myself nuts a little bit, because it's like, I love the puzzle solving, especially the math part of the puzzle solving of like, how do you make it better? But then I also really love the tangible part of like kind of going and doing it and seeing it. So I'm a little bit, probably, I guess, a little bit unique that way. I'm sure there's other people that feel that way, but that's probably a little bit my neurosis that ends up beneficial for my investors at least.
Yeah,
because
it becomes more collaborative with the folks in the chair, and that's important. And they get out of the chair and they walk the floor. I managed Bucyrus Chile as its gerente general. I know you speak a little Spanish, but I was down there for a few years. We had a little manufacturing facility. We did some bronze casting and some lathe work, and we'd press gears and things onto shafts, and serving the copper industry mainly. And when I arrived, the parts manager, and this was a parts depot. I mean, I had everything ex-Brazil, but this little manufacturing area, and you could see down into the warehouse from the offices. This was up on the second floor of the industrial building, and he would yell down to the floor rather than go down and talk to the foreman. And so we went down there on a look-see visit, my wife and I, and this is back in the 80s under Pinochet, and and I saw this, and I said, Jorge, what are you doing? And he says, I'm directing the troops, basically. And so I said, okay, I thought that was interesting. Maybe I didn't know enough about Latin America, and that's just how he was going to do it, and so forth. And I didn't say anything. But then I asked him actually to prepare an inventory assessment, and we were going to get rid of some stuff that hadn't been sold in years and just write it off. And I said, I'm going back to the U.S. for a few weeks, pack up. When I come back, I'd like to have a complete report on the inventory. And we went through the details and so forth and so on, came back down, and I said, where's the report? And he said, well, I don't have it. And I said, how come? And he said, well, I just didn't do it. I don't think it's important. And I said, I'm 29, right? And we came to an understanding where he left the company which was difficult, but we managed it. And I elevated this woman to parts manager, and boy, she was good. And she went up and downstairs in high heels down to the floor so she could talk to the guys, It was just, she was fabulous. And, but, if you don't get down on the floor with the guys, you don't know what the heck's going on. I mean, that's the way I see it. I don't know. Tell me about your career path. So after you got out of Wharton, what happened?
Yeah. So just maybe a precursor to that. I was doing consulting in Detroit before I went to Wharton, and that was mostly manufacturing clients. And as part of that, I said, I love manufacturing, but I want to try to become CEO or an investor in manufacturing companies. And I knew I needed more education to be able to get the experiences to do that. So that's why I went back to graduate school. And then, post Wharton, worked at John Deere, did, entertainingly enough, I had 2 jobs there that couldn't have been more different, but it kind of fits my personality. I just explained. The first one was like corporate strategy, talking to, working with mostly C-level guys on the second floor of the Rust Palace, which is John Deere's headquarters in Moline. And then the second job was I was a shop floor supervisor in Waterloo, Iowa, making 7,700 and 7,800 series tractors as, basically, managing 70 UAW guys to build 27 tractors a day. And I'll tell you, I really like the manufacturing job better than the strategy job, because I remember telling the HR guy that I was friends with, he's like, what do you want to do next after this strategy thing? And I was like, well, as soon as possible, I want to get a real job. And he's like, well, he laughed at me, right? And he's like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean you want to get a real job? And I said, well, I want to do a job where I was like, look, Dan, I love manufacturing and businesses, but strategy is cool, but like manufacturing does like 3 things that customers pay you for. They make things, they develop products, or like they sell things. They match the product to the customer's needs. So I was like, I either want to go like, do manufacturing. I want to go like make things. I want to go work in a factory, or I want to go out into the field and work with customers. So, and he laughed at me because he's like, wow, you Ivy League weenies don't normally want to like get your hands dirty like that. That's kind of unique and odd. And I was like, well, but I like tangible things, and I just went to, I don't think of myself as an Ivy League weenie whatsoever, because I just went there as a way to, work more in manufacturing. So that worked out. I did that job, and then I worked at Eaton Corporation, which was great. When I was at Eaton, Sandy Cutler was the CEO. I would argue that he's, a guy like Jack Welch gets a lot more press, but, Sandy Cutler, I think, was probably one of the best CEOs that
Jack kind of got his comeuppance over the whole thing, and there was the woman thing and all of that. So it's interesting you mentioned that, because if you were watching Jack Welch during his heyday, of course everybody was saying, I'm one of Jack Welch's guys, and now I'm sure they're sort of downplaying that a little.
Well, like Sandy Cutler was, all the bravo of Jack Welch, and maybe then some, without the bravado, right? And he was an awesome CEO in my opinion, and the way he set up Eaton to succeed was really, really impressive. So working there was great. I worked in supply chain first, and then I was a plant manager in Reynosa, Mexico, running a automotive plant. And then,
cool. How long did that last?
A couple of years. So it was a brownfield startup.
Were you married at the time?
I was, and that was, I was married, and I started that job when my daughter was 3 months old. So,
oh man. Yeah, I went to Chile when my son was like 6 months old. It was an interesting conversation.
My wife jokingly talks, well, maybe not so jokingly, but I've been married, so it's going to be, let me think about this, 27 years here, October 17th. And
Piker, I'm coming up on 50 in November.
So, but she still talks about like, I had this flip phone back then, and she's like, it used to like send like chills and anger down my spine when that phone would ring on Saturdays and Sundays, because like it was a startup plant, and like, just things would go badly. So I would
Well, of
like,
course. I mean,
we'd have something planned, right? And then like that phone would ring, and then we'd have to cancel our plans. And yeah, that was those were some rough days, working 16, 18, 20 hours. There were days I would sleep on my couch in my office and just not leave the plant because it was just so busy. But yeah, that was a crazy time. But like I jokingly say that I got 20 years of manufacturing experience in like 2 years. And
yeah.
we had
Course.
Yeah, we had strikes, we had a hurricane, we had new product lines being brought in, product lines from existing plants being brought in, starting up a new supply chain in Mexico, like basically everything you could possibly do in a manufacturing career I compressed into 2 years. But it was a great 2 years.
Yeah, that must come in handy at like United Initiators and Western Industries, right? There were some labor issues in both those cases.
Oh yeah, huge beneficial thing to like understand how businesses work, and from a manufacturing standpoint, having done it and done that part. I argue that startup shutdowns and turnarounds are really where you learn the most, right? You see a lot of these folks, they'll say, oh, I've got 20 years of operations experience. And it's like, well, do you have 20 years of experience, or do you have 1 year of experience 20 times in a row?
Interesting.
Because you've been running the same steady state thing for 20 years. That's really not 20 years of experience.
Yeah. It lacks the diversity to really understand the complexities and context of everything that's influencing you, really. People get into a position and they don't recognize the web of stuff that's got to get done around them that they've never really been involved in. I think it's real common. And by the way, I think that's a human condition at this point with our economy. If you think about almost anything in your immediate physical environment in that room, from the Venetian blinds to the molding, you may or may not be able to tell me exactly what the guy has to do to create the pigment in the paint behind you, or the plastic in your glasses, even if you have a general idea. And any given one of those people have so many different expertises that have to go into almost everything. And you don't get that unless you've been around. So tell us about Opta Group. This is a shining star, at least so far, I think, in your portfolio. Certainly the transformation is, it's kind of like what Speyside does, and we'll get into Speyside as a firm in a minute. But I'd like to hear about Opta.
Yep. So Opta so we bought Opta Minerals from Sun Opta back in 2016, and that was actually the first deal that got done in the first institutional fund that we raised at Speyside. And my other partner and I, Kevin Doherty, we did the deal, and then Kevin said, "Hey, I don't want to come up here to Toronto as soon as this deal's closed. I want you come up here and figure it out going forward." And I said, "Okay, yeah, no problem. Like I like that stuff, so not an issue." Now it was. Interestingly enough, Opta was a publicly traded company owned by a publicly traded company, which is kind of odd. So we bought it, went public to private, and that was good. Saved a bunch of costs that way, and then just embarked on a pretty simple strategy, frankly, to improve it. And what was going on with Opta at the time was it was about $140 million revenue business with like $7.8 million of EBITDA, but I would say 70% of the business was underperforming from an EBITDA perspective. It was either negative EBITDA or no EBITDA. And so I said, all right, real simple plan here. We're going to either shut down, sell off, or turn around anything that's not making money. And that worked pretty well. Within 18 months, EBITDA had doubled to about 16 million of EBITDA. Debt had been halved from 38 million to 17.4. We shut down, 17 plants or sold off 17 plants. And then, the equity value had increased significantly as a result of that, which made a lot of sense. And then we were in the process of looking to buy their competitor. Well, a holding company that owned their competitor called SKW. I thought that we would buy SKW and then have SKW sell Opta, a company called ESM. We decided to just put them both together, which turned out to be a really good move. We were then able to triple the EBITDA over the next 4 years, from 2019 to, well, I ascended to the chairman of the board in like 2018, just on the board before that. And it was like, then we moved me to chairman, and then I architected the plan, tripled the EBITDA of that business, then put it into a continuation vehicle in 2023. And now we've almost doubled the EBITDA again in the last couple of years.
So in that transaction to the CV, was there sort of any friction on the valuation of the transaction? Because it's hard. I mean, there's some embedded conflicts, right? If you're going to be paying off one set of investors and putting another in, or how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so it was really simple, Tim, to navigate it, because we allowed any existing investor to roll their equity if they wanted to.
And did they generally?
Some of them did. Most of them took liquidity. It's typical in those transactions.
Yeah, it's endemic right now. No, I mean, that's typical right now. I think 9 out of 10 times that's what they're really after in the CV. That's kind of what it's trying to solve. Well, tell us about Speyside. Just kind of, it started out entrepreneurial, been professionalized. What were the steps? Take us through that history.
Yeah, exactly. So Kevin Doherty, my third partner, he started Speyside back in 2004. He was a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time in their transaction services team. And he formed Speyside to be able to buy a company that eventually was called Sweet Ovations, which was a corporate carve-out from a company called Evonik, which is a large specialty chemicals manufacturer based in Munich. But they had a business that was a fruit and flavors business that didn't fit really well with their specialty chemical strategy. So no big surprise. Raspberries don't mix well with like cyanamide and persulfates and things like that. And literally or physically, or figuratively.
Chemicals and materials humor for those out there.
Yeah, exactly. So they were looking to sell that off, and they were having a little bit of a challenge with it. So they asked him to buy it, and he was able to, get a deal done. He set up Speyside to do that. That worked out well.
Remind the listeners, where does Speyside come from?
Yeah, so Kevin his family, some of his family came from Scotland, and he's a Scotch whiskey fan. As a result, Speyside is one of the 5 Scotch whiskey producing areas in the country of Scotland. And he decided to name it after that Scotch whiskey producing area, because it's a little bit of an inside joke that he says that a couple rounds of Scotch late one night in Munich, Germany, was which was created the lubricant to get the deal done in a creative way. And nice. So it's a bit of a inside joke. He'll tell you though, like, that actually his favorite Scotch whiskeys are from the area of Eastleigh, which is...
Oh, okay. Single malts?
Yeah, that's where the real peaty Scotches come from, because that island doesn't have trees anymore. But he'll tell you that he didn't think anybody would be able to pronounce that correctly.
So Speyside was pronounceable and a recognized region.
Exactly.
Okay, so Sweet Ovations. Take it from there.
Yeah, so he did that deal, and it had a couple opportunities for improvement that worked out really well for them.
This was like flavorings, and yeah, like competes with IFC and what international flavors and flavors, and I think right, international flavors, isn't that the other, like a competitor to this?
Yeah, so they do, like, if you've ever had yogurt where it has that delicious fruit in the bottom of the yogurt, they make that delicious compote, which is a cool, French word for jelly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's essentially macerated fruit with sugar added to it and some sort of thickening agent. But it gets put into, it mixes really well into yogurts.
Lots of applications. Yeah.
Yeah. And they also made the Starbucks caramel, some other things of that nature, but yeah, mostly fruit and flavors. And at the time, Sweet Ovations was buying all their fruit once a year, and then they were putting it into freezers, and that wasn't really great from a working capital management perspective. So he did a couple improvement things. He said, "Hey, I can buy fruit from Ecuador once a month versus buying fruit once a year, and then you don't have to hold it in refrigerated or frozen warehouses, which are, by the way, really expensive." And then he also institutionalized standardized work across the shop floor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Upshot is, he generated a lot of cash flow from reducing the working capital needs, and then generated a lot of EBITDA margin improvement from fixing how the business was run. And that was, really entrepreneurism by acquisition, that started Speyside. And then he did a couple other deals after that using the cash from Sweet Ovations. And then I joined in 2012. We did a couple other deals with the idea of raising a institutional fund in the future. We started that in 2015. Did the final close in early 2016, which then led us into doing Opta, which was our first deal as an institutional fund. And then we've just, since then, we've just kind of straight up into the right in terms of doing more deals and, making the firm a lot better and more, process driven and sophisticated.
Right. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and kind of talk about how you manage the portfolio companies. What kind of board level interventions do you find the most effective when a company faces various kinds of things: labor complexity, supply chain stuff, volatility, and we'll talk about this, the post bolt-on acquisition stuff, because it's a separate topic and it's one not really appreciated. There's so many add-on strategies out there, and there are issues, and I'm sure you've faced, if not all of them, a lot of them. But talk about the board. What can the board do, and how do you intervene and help manage that process for labor, supply chain stuff?
So it's a great question. And I think it's a little bit what differentiates us at Speyside from a lot of other private equity firms. And the reason why I say that is we like to say we're, Kevin, Nick, and I like to say we're a bunch of operators that raised a fund or built a firm around those concepts. So it's a fund of operators for operators. And if you're a management team, if you're a good operator as part of the management team, it's probably a really good thing because we understand your job, every day. If you're a bureaucrat or a politician as a C-level guy in one of our companies, it's probably not as fun for you. And the reason why is we've done those jobs, so we know what we're looking at, and we're pretty quick to call BS on something, and we don't really suffer fools gladly. So that's the thing that's a little bit different. And the reason why that's important for your question about the board is that, in a lot of the companies we own, if we look at a C-level person and say, hey, this needs to be fixed, and this is why we think it needs to be fixed, here's the data, here's the logic. If they don't have a really good reason why they agree, it's a kind of polite but direct conversation that can ensue, which is something like, hey, listen, this needs to happen. And if you're not going to do it, like I can just do it myself. I've been there, done that. And I know what I'm asking you to do works. And I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done or suffered through myself. So there's a bit of that goes on.
The medicine goes down a little easier that way.
Yeah. And we really like to give equity long-term incentive plans to our, key 3 to 7 people in our businesses. So, we're asking them to do things that will, should make them millions of dollars when we sell the business, right? So it's a bit of a, that double prong effect of, hey, we've been there, done that, and hey, you're going to make a bunch of money by improving the business in this way. It tends to make things pretty smooth, but if necessary, we'll get directly engaged, or sometimes we'll hire operating partners that have special skills to do those things.
Now, are they compensated just by the company, or do you pay them, separately?
It depends. Generally, we like to have them paid by the company, and we'll usually give them equity as well.
And so that's right. So they'll get some warrant coverage on that, and probably some KPI sort of bonus stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes we'll use boutique consultants. We have used the likes of like McKinsey, Bain, BCG in certain situations, but who we prefer to use as consultants are people that offer like 1 to 2 services that have like spun out of those larger, companies like McKinsey, Bain, or BCG.
Yeah. Do you find yourself going to the same set of people, or does each company provide a unique opportunity for a different sort of person?
We see a lot of reuse of consultants. I mean, it's not always the same people over and over and over again, but we definitely we don't mind doing that at all, because then you get to know them pretty well, and
you get the relationship, and it's more effective. You get to stuff works easier because there's all sorts of stuff already been worked out interpersonally and stuff. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and then you can also have like really direct, open, honest discussions with them. Like, there's one guy I really like to use for pricing, and I was asking him to do some due diligence on the deal we're looking at, and he was like saying, "Hey, Erik, I think I can do this in a couple weeks, and it will cost this amount of money." And I was like, "Matt, you know what? If it takes you 4 weeks, just tell me that, and we'll just pay you more. Like,
right.
It's okay. Like, I'm not." And the guy, he's just like as honest as the day is long. I've known him for 25 years. We went to Wharton together, and like, I mean, he's not going to cheat us.
Consultants are in an odd place. We're representing a GP right now who rose to the top of McKinsey. He ran their global tech and telecom practice, and he does not humble brag. He doesn't brag at all. He's just it's very interesting. He's extremely results oriented and has done so much, and it's good to hear that people like that can add value and the relationships matter. So how do you evaluate founders and C-level folks for leadership potential, and also for their capacity for the kind of transformation? Because you guys pull the levers pretty quick after you involved, because you've studied it and you have some things you want to do. How do you evaluate folks for whether or not they're going to be able to manage that, embrace the ambiguity, let's say?
Funny you ask, because over the last week or two, I've been trying to put that methodology into a framework in Excel that is, quantitatively analytical, right? For a subject that's very qualitative.
Yeah.
And so I'm calling that the HCAF, which is Human Capital Assessment Framework. And it's kind of 2 parts of the framework. So the first part is, if you could imagine, across the top are the people in the organization. So like, CEO, CFO, COO, chief marketing officer, whatever. The top 3 to 7 people that are going to create the value in the deal. And then essentially what's down below is they get a rating, a numeric rating, based on the deal theses. So essentially what I'm trying to do is a talent gap analysis.
Interesting.
Hey, does the current management team have the ability to execute the deal theses that we have to create value?
And how do you score that stuff from prior behaviors, or what do you do?
I mean, to be blunt, it's it's a very inexact science. It's psychology, right?
Yeah, it's a heuristic.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'm doing that because I'm like we've hired some new folks, and it's like, how do I take like 20 some years of experience of doing deals and analyzing,
get a playbook together for people. Yeah.
And doing, thinking about management teams, and then put it into what I would call the paint by numbers, framework, right? So it's like, how do I teach a 25-year-old to, evaluate talent in a Portco target, which is really hard to do. Some of it's, I honestly can't make it all. I can't tell everybody everything. Some of those things, just like, you've learned over 20 years, it's in the back of your brain. It's in, in the medulla oblongata.
It's why I can talk to you with such familiarity. I've been involved in this stuff for a long time.
Right. So a lot of it's subjective, but the goal is to, understand, A, does the person have the competencies? B, do they have like the mental, culture, personality? And C, do they have the skills, to execute the way that we would want them to execute? So a lot of that's hard, and you can have them do a battery of psychological tests, but it's and those help for sure to understand like what motivates people and how they think about the world and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's trying to match value creation opportunities with human capital.
Right. So what elements of your operational playbook are most decisive in the first 100 days? And how do you sequence those things for speed without sacrificing durability? I mean, it's hard to get permanent stuff done in such a short period of time. So how do you think about that?
Yep. So we have what we call our Portco value creation system, and there's two phases. Phase 1 is operational improvement, and phase 2 is growth. So with operational improvement, a lot of that are things that, we've done a lot of and we know how to control. It's things like, aligning and incentivizing the management team, rationalizing the revenue portfolio, optimizing the operational footprint, doing sales force effectiveness, doing supply chain management through spend leverage a little bit better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we'll do is we will build during operational due diligence, we will identify the areas in phase 1 and phase 2 where we think there's a lot of opportunity to improve EBITDA. And then during operational due diligence, we will test those hypotheses. And then as part of the hypothesis testing, we'll test the human capital on whether, they can execute.
Is this pre-transaction?
Pre-transaction. And then we will build project plans based on what we expect to do. And generally there's a 90-day plan, and then there's a 1-year plan, and then there's a 5-year plan.
So all this is done pre-transaction in your diligence process. Got it. So you're really ready to go on day 1. You can pull the trigger on a bunch of different things because you've already identified those 3 to 5 elements, levers you can pull.
Correct. Yep. And then day 1, we start executing.
Mm-hmm. So if you don't identify those sort of clean and clear value add opportunities, do you do a deal? I mean, how many of those levers do you have to have, and how do you assess which ones are going to work?
Yep. So we want to have like 3 to 5. Definitely. That's maybe one mistake we made in Fund 1, which is we had one deal where there was only one lever, and we weren't really in control of it. We were deploying what I would call hope as a strategy, which is not good. And we learned from that. So it was like we were hoping to get this supply contract from BASF, and we didn't get it. And we got out of the deal and we didn't lose money, but if we would have gotten that contract, we would have made a lot of money. But we didn't control whether we got it or not. So what we want to see is 3 to 5 levers that are identifiable, and we understand how to execute on those, and we can see a clear path that can be written into a project plan of how we're going to do it.
Give us a couple of examples here of the kind of things in, like, some of the deals are in your portfolio right now that you identified pre-transaction and they were successfully implemented because you had identified those levers and could pull them.
Yeah, sure. Great example would be back to that Opta example. I wrote up a whole plan on how 26 plants were going to become 9 plants over 18 months. And it was obvious that those plants were not making, they weren't making money, right? So then I built a tool to analyze the best way to, have that plant cease, whether it was, sell it off or shut it down or, whatever.
Mm-hmm. How many did you sell off versus shut down?
We sold off I think 3 or 4, if I remember correctly. And the rest were shutdowns. Well, or the assets of the plant got sold, but not as a business.
Right. And how many people were affected in those sorts of things? Because that has to be painful.
About 100.
That's not too bad. So these were smaller operations.
Yeah, they were smaller, and it was fine because some of them, they got sold off, and the next buyer picked up the people. It's not like they didn't have any job; they were just working for somebody else.
Yeah. So missed deals, broken auctions, broken process. When you need to do some so-called creative kind of structuring to get a deal done at an attractive valuation, what sorts of things are you concerned about? And tell us about the times when the structuring made a difference.
Yeah, the thing that we're worried about there is risk, is the reality. I think the analogy I like to use of us doing deals is because we like to buy things that can be improved. I like to plagiarize this Michelangelo quote, which is he said that, I saw the angel in the marble and it was my job to carve until I set it free.
Right. Remove the material that wasn't the angel.
Yeah. And I think that's a very apt description of what we do at Speyside, right? Because usually the kinds of companies we buy, 3 years after we've doubled the EBITDA by, doubling or tripling the EBITDA margins. However, using that analogy and extending it to your question would be, how do you buy that block of marble, right, so that you protect your downside? So it's you're going to carve the angel out of the marble, but how do you make sure that if you hit a crack in the marble while you're trying
the whole thing doesn't crack apart? Yeah.
Right. So how do you structure the deal in the purchase agreement around mitigating those risks? And so that's a lot of what we think about during due diligence. And
what sorts of tools will you have in the purchase agreement that that give you the comfort or mitigate that risk?
Yeah, it's reps and warranties. The key though is to identify it right during due diligence. That's the hard part. So if you can identify it, you can structure around it. That where people get into trouble, and the reason why certain PE firms will just completely avoid certain spaces or certain deals is because and rightfully so, it is the right thing for them to do. But they don't feel comfortable understanding the risk and then therefore how to mitigate it. But that's the key. For us, we'll buy companies that have environmental liabilities or risks if we can understand it and we understand how we're going to mitigate it or cauterize it.
Right.
Yeah, stuff like that. So it's fine, but other people won't do that, or pension risks, or sometimes owners are difficult to deal with, either because they need to see a certain headline number, or maybe their nephew works in the business and they're you can't fire Bob, my nephew, right? Hence the word nepotism, or I don't want you to change the name of the company, or whatever it happens to be. But we're generally pretty flexible on a lot of that stuff, so we'll just work around it and structure it and everybody's happy in the end.
Yeah. Let's talk about bolt-ons and kind of the special pitfalls to avoid that you might think of, and how do they differ from platform deals? How do you think about that, and particularly the risks?
Yeah, they're 80% similar, I would say, in terms of thinking about them from a financial perspective. The thing that's interesting about bolt-ons or any M&A, I think the statistic I remember from graduate school is that 85% of bolt-on, acquisitions or acquisitions done by corporations fail to create value on a cash-on-cash basis. And there's two big reasons why that's true. Number one is the acquiring company overpays for the bolt-on. And then number two, and probably the more important thing, is that they fail to integrate the acquisition appropriately and drive the synergies.
What kinds of things do they face where they, lack of integration? Is it like IT or sales and marketing, or where do they have real integration issues?
Yeah, the reality of the matter is in, manufacturing companies, there's 8 or 9 potential synergies you can have, right? You can consolidate plants. One of the businesses, if they're similar businesses, is going to be, if they buy the same raw material, somebody's buying it cheaper and you should buy all of it on that contract. Sales forces can be integrated. Usually, SG&A is redundant. You don't need 2 CFOs. There are situations where they can leverage each other's technology and sell more of the products, because maybe somebody has access to channels that the other one doesn't, or, whatever. But they're those are pretty well known. But the question is, did you estimate them correctly? And then once you close, do you have a plan to execute to get those synergies? And the reality of the matter is that, kind of, if you don't get those synergies in the first 18 to 24 months, you're probably not getting them. So we tend to think about things more positively on the operational synergy side than the commercial synergy side. I like to tell our folks that work at in our companies or in our fund that I generally discount commercial synergies 80 to 100%. Because we don't believe in hope as a strategy.
Right. But you can close a plant, or you can reorganize something, let one of those finance guys go or more.
Get rid of negative EBITDA margin business, right? I mean, if there are literally, we bought companies where they're making things where it would be cheaper to strap a $20 bill, to a postcard than to make and send them their product, because it's they're making no money.
So what kind of founder issues do you mainly run into? What are give me the top 3 things that you find that founders give you problems in?
So the first thing is on valuations. So let me tell you what they are, then I'll explain them. Number 1 would be valuation and understanding the mechanics of that. Number 2 would be, I guess I would say, ego applied to operations of the business. And then number 3 would be like sacred cows. And from a valuation standpoint, there are some bad bankers out there or financial intermediaries, and they sometimes give bad advice, or there are some people that give bad advice. Like I read this one book the other day, and it was basically about entrepreneurship through acquisition. And one of the things the guy said in the book, which is completely wrong, is that essentially you should get a cash value for your business, and you should also get value for the working capital, or the property, plant, equipment. And that's not correct. Like you don't get to sell both things. You don't get to sell both the cash flow and the assets. And there's a reason for that, which is that the assets of the business are what are creating the cash flow.
Creating the cash flow, of course.
So you can sell one or the other, but not both. And a lot of owner operated companies, they don't understand that.
I've never heard of people that being an ask. It shows I'm a bit of an ingenue, I guess. It sounds like a crazy ask.
Yeah. Well, when you go to negotiate the working capital peg, they're like, what do you mean working capital peg? Like, that's going to be zero. Like, why would I have to give you working capital?
Yeah, we can talk about a sale leaseback of property, but
Right. So that's number one. And then the other part of that from a valuation issue is like, nobody wants to be honest about their baby, right? Like everybody thinks their baby's beautiful and rightfully so. Some of these folks have run these businesses for 30, 40, 50 years and they are beautiful in a way, right? And, all the, blood, sweat, and tears that went into creating this, business that generates a certain amount of cash flow or EBITDA. I mean, it's really impressive what these people gave up and struggled through to do it. But the problem is that's a sunk cost fallacy. Like, and it's not that I don't care about it, but it's like, I care more about like, what's the business going to do going forward? I don't care so much about what it took for you to get there.
Historic stuff is, yeah.
Right. But as a result, people tend to overvalue their business because of their struggle, right?
Yeah. And it is a struggle.
Yeah, and not as a kind of, dispassionate third party that's just like, I'm going to think about it in terms of numbers and cash flow. So that's important. And then, sometimes, guys that have been in the business for so long, they lack perspective. Right. So they have a little bit, and they've been successful. So they kind of have a right to have a bit of an ego.
What they've done is hard, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely hard. Right. And I've been there, done that too. And I know it's hard, but, sometimes when you're in a business for a long time, you lose perspective. You could say you fail to see the forest through the trees. And sometimes, like guys are taking their 30 or 40 or 50 years of history and operating the business with that ego, thinking like there's no better way to do this, or, this is great or whatever, which, you understand that. I mean, I sometimes think that, like Opta, for example, I've been now the chairman of the board of that for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. I'm kind of like, what? Pretty soon here, like, if we have a liquidity event, if somebody asked me to like keeping the chairman of the board, I would say no. And the reason why is it's like, you need fresh blood in there. You need fresh eyes. You need somebody else who's, questions things. And, but, not everybody likes being questioned, but it's a good, healthy thing. So I'd say, yeah, so that's what I mean when I'm, say ego applied to the operations.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's basic human nature sort of things, but just got to work through them.
So what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of operational private equity you wish more founders, lenders, LPs, your community appreciated? And how does that misunderstanding show up in your, either in the negotiations or the first 100 days, or what aren't people getting?
That's a good question. I think, when we explained it to them, they mostly get it. I would say our investors see, the other 99.9% of PE firms that create value differently than us. Most of them are buy and build or significant financial engineering, meaning they'll lever something up 5 to 7x and then write a really small equity check. And that's how they generate really strong returns. It's a different model.
Less and less common than it was when I started the business in the 80s.
For sure, that's true.
Well, they can't attract, they can't generate that many returns. The arbitrage of those kind of deals is going away, the spreads generally. And B, the investors won't support it. They don't want to do that.
I guess the biggest thing I'd want people to know, if I could do the Matrix thing and just like literally put something into their brain, like Neo or something, would be that like, while we may make it look easy at Speyside, like it's not easy. And we're kind of like ducks, right? So it looks all calm and nice on the surface, but the paddling is significant underneath the water, right? And so just like sometimes like there are things where you will see the duck be a little disheveled or something. So just understand, like, be a little bit patient.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So a lot of moving parts, but it's super fun and interesting, and we love doing it. And I guess the other thing I would tell, like, potential investors, if you can be the duck, so to speak, like, there's a lot of money to be made, doing what we do. You just got to align the right resources on the right tasks to do it, and that's what we're really good at.
If you could go back in time and give the young Erik a few words of advice coming out of Wharton, say, before you go through all of this, what might that advice be?
Find patience sooner.
Okay.
I feel like I still lack patience to a certain extent, which is both a gift and a challenge.
Uh-huh. Well, so do you actively work on patience? Let me give you an example. If you're in traffic and you're a few minutes late getting somewhere, do you tell yourself, this is my opportunity to grow? No.
Well, so that sort of stuff doesn't bug me, but like,
okay. With your portfolio companies and other people.
It's patience with, and maybe a little bit myself. Like, the person I get the most mad at when, if something doesn't go well is me. And so, maybe have a little more patience with myself too. And if you don't be so hard, but it's it's good to have a sense of urgency in what we do, for sure. That's very, very valuable and needed. But there's probably more people. There are probably certain people I should foist that sense of urgency onto, versus like, everybody. I guess I'll say it that way.
You should have a rheostat for adjusting the level of patience,
So that's the thing. Like, if I could go back and
start earlier on the process.
Earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know. I've always enjoyed the journey, so I'm good at that part of it. For me, it's not just about the destination or anything at all. It's really, I enjoy the journey, and, I would tell you speak Spanish a little bit. So, calmate would be maybe something I would tell myself, patience and relax a little bit at times. It's all going to work out just fine. Don't worry.
No me preocupes. Sort of. It still got you though. Yeah, it still got you though. That amygdala is still jacking out the juice.
Exactly. But that would probably be the biggest thing. Okay. Is patience.
Well, let's leave it on that note. This has been terrific. I really appreciate it. I love hearing stories, and yours is exceptional. And I also like kind of what you're doing and the Midwestern values you bring to it. And we need more of that. We really do. It's quintessentially American, and I'm like this.
I think I love manufacturing, and I think it's really good for our country and the continent, honestly, like Canada and Mexico as well. And we live in a great place in a great time in history, and manufacturing allows people in this country and Canada and Mexico to have some pretty good jobs that, great middle class because of it, or opportunities for it. So I love being part of it. I love, trying to figure out how to solve problems.
Let me ask one more. AI and manufacturing. Kind of give me your macro view on, kind of what you're doing in your portfolio companies to embrace and potentially measure ROI, although I haven't heard many cases where we can quantify stuff that's been, that's been done. And then where are we headed in manufacturing and AI right now? Because it seems like if you think about the Matrix, that it's probably the wrong analogy. But if you think about sort of a futuristic way with dark warehouses and dark manufacturing entirely controlled by robotics and semi-autonomous agents, and we hope not autonomous agents, although who the hell knows where that's going. So tell me about your macro view and what you're doing in portfolio companies. I think that would be something people would be interested in.
Yeah. So my macro view is this. I really do believe that manufacturing is going to come back to North America at an accelerating pace. It started back in like 2017 when the tax laws got changed, and then because of Trump. And then several things have happened over the last, call it, 8 to 10 years that are, continuing to accelerate that trend. Some of it being reduction of globalization, some of it, being around, technologies, et cetera, et cetera. That said, we in North America, while we have great infrastructure, right? We have great natural resources. We have great navigable waterways. We have great a lot of stuff. What we don't have enough of is the demographics to support manufacturing plants with a lot of people in them. So that's also a really good opportunity for people in this country, right? And so my vision is that over the next 5 to 10 years, what you're going to see is more and more and more manufacturing plants, especially in the Midwest, because of the infrastructure that exists there. However, instead of people working on production lines to make products, they will end up working on robots and AI and other things to maintain those things to make the products, right? And those jobs are incredibly, incredibly well-paying jobs. Like a friend of my family, he's a robotics technician and maintenance guy at a large car manufacturing company. He makes $250,000 a year doing that.
Must be a real valuable fellow.
Yeah, he went to high school and then he did the electrical trade program, blah, 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 blah. Never went to college, never got a master's degree. His brother-in-law, who works at the same company as I can't remember, is like director of finance or something, or some director level job, undergraduate degree from U of M, MBA from, I don't remember, some good school, probably Notre Dame. No, just kidding. But the guy that maintains the robots makes more than the guy who, maintains the balance sheet, right? So is my point. So there's a lot of opportunity here. So my vision is more and more and more manufacturing will come back to the United States because we're afraid of the long supply chains, but it will be automated, especially in the US and Canada. So really high level and really low level manufacturing is ripe for automation. The stuff in the middle, that's really good to go to Mexico, just because labor rates tend to be a little bit, better there. And that's what I think will happen. So what we're doing at Speyside, interestingly enough, is one of our Portco value creation systems is AI, machine learning, automation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, broadly characterized as Industry 4.0 tools. And so we have a whole project that we're doing right now to evaluate those tools to be used in Portcos and how we can use those tools to make EBITDA be better. So that's one thing. What I would like to do in the future, interestingly enough, is if you said, hey, Erik, I know, your current strategy is a LBO control strategy, lower middle market, $100 million to $500 million revenue manufacturing businesses. If you could pick your next strategy, if you're going to do a different strategy to add on into the Speyside portfolio, what would it be? And the answer is a growth equity fund focused on Industry 4.0 technologies that I just described, because I think that's going to boom, and it would be beneficial. We're going to figure out what they are anyway by wanting to deploy them in our LBO strategy. So why not, invest in companies that need growth equity?
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting as well, because you wouldn't necessarily, you would have to use more, your levers wouldn't be as, I don't know, powerful. They'd be different. I mean, covenants in an agreement are one thing, but, on the ground operations, the board level, going to be trickier. Not insurmountable, but trickier, because you don't have that one additional share.
Yeah, it's just, now when I say growth equity, I do not mean venture capital early stage.
No.
What I mean is companies that have revenue and probably even have profit, but they need capital to scale. They have a really good product. They need capital to, build a manufacturing plant, or build out a supply chain, or invest in marketing activities, or salespeople, or, whatever.
Yeah. And, but implicit in the word, although maybe you disagree or feel differently, growth typically means, well, there's two kinds. One are sort of C rounds of venture-backed companies and more mature, the technology focused typically, and so where that's growth, venture growth, if you will. And there's sort of private equity growth, which is companies that are more prosaic and generally less high-tech focused. But in both cases, you're buying a minority interest. It's not control investing. So, in a growth strategy and growth fund, you're thinking about minority interests, right?
Generally, that would probably be the case.
Yeah. I mean, you may have exceptions in the LPA for doing a control deal here or there if there's an exceptional growth-related thing, but which would then mean your management strategy in a control versus non-control situation, people are people. So you just you can structure it one way in terms of covenants, but the day-to-day board-level stuff is a little trickier, I think. So it would be important for you, I think, to identify the areas where this strategy was differentiated from the LBO strategy, and a very clear objective for managing the different types of things that you have to do when you're not a control investor. I mean, that's kind of where the LPs are going to go to on this. And so I would go back into the existing portfolio and show where, had you done X or Y, these kinds of things in your existing portfolio, could have been opportunities, even if you weren't a control investor, and show how those opportunities were executed upon. And you can do that with less, not with a non-control position, and in a new deal. And connecting that up, which I think would be no trouble at all for you guys, that I think would impress the LPs more.
Yeah, I think that, if an LP said, well, why should we give you money to do that strategy? I would say it's kind of like being able to, because of the LBO strategy that we run, right? Knowing that those technologies would be used in our LBO strategy, we're in a really interesting place to stand by the finish line and pick the winners before they cross it.
Interesting analogy. Yeah. That makes sense. And I think there are also certain advantages to the growth paradigm. I mean, in the sense that, you have to be investing in situations where that collaboration with a certain number of the existing C-level folks and the founder is, becomes essential. You can't, if it's not just a short transition period, now you're truly a collaborative partner over time. And that one's probably other significant differentiator. But really interesting. Love to talk to you about that as and when you get an idea about launching it, but that's not what this is about. So, alrighty, once again, I appreciate that on the AI. I should have asked you before. And anyway, Erik, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Please visit us online at touchstonegroupllc.com.